Aloha Hawaii. I am Pokalai Nui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri on radio station KWAI 1080 on your AM dial. It is 8 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, and today is the 15th day of September in the year 2012. Welcome to the program, or welcome back to the program. We begin this program at 4 o'clock, or a few minutes after 4, and we continue until 6 o'clock on Saturdays, and then on Sunday mornings we have another 2 hours of discussion, and that goes from 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. So if in case you miss any of these programs and would like to join us in this kind of an affair on the weekends, where we try to take a potpourri of issues and ideas and share them with one another, you're welcome to join us, and you're welcome to call and share your opinions on some of these topics. We have been talking about this relationship between the United States and other countries, especially more recently what is happening in the Middle East and the violence that is being perpetrated now, and it seems in response to the American violence perpetrated against these Middle Eastern countries. Now we see the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Libya, and we see many more active actions being taken. One of our callers have suggested, and that was our last caller, that if you look back from a more historical perspective and you see the invasions that have been committed by the, the Judeo-Christian into these Persian or these Arabian areas, and the wiping out, or the attempt to wipe out those societies, and then you see the uprising by these societies to come back and take over these other countries. Right in the center of all of that is the land of Turkey, and you have what was previously known as Constantinople, which name was representative of a Christian approach to the world. It was Christian governed, and today it is known as Istanbul, the larger Islam. And Istanbul is known as the city that is the oldest city in recorded history, and that is controlled by Islamic religion rather than the Christian religion. But it's a sign of the going back and forth among these what is it called, monotheistic religions that all come from essentially the old book, or the Old Testament, the Holy Bible. And so you have that particular approach, and trying to understand or get a perspective from that side. Our other caller, Michael, who was the first caller, says that look at what is happening and what it predicts to occur in the future, and how near or far that future will be is hard to say. Johan Galtung writes about the not the clash, the collapse of the U.S. empire, and he predicts it collapsing in about 2025. And after going through the George Bush II's presidential period, he then moved his prediction down by 5 years, saying that George Bush was pulling the American empire down even faster than he had anticipated when he first came out with these predictions. And so he was saying, look at not only the economic power of the United States or the military power of the United States, but look at the respect that the culture has, the American culture has now throughout the world, and look at the moral leadership that the United States can claim. They're still coming out with claiming who's ahead and who's behind in terms of human rights. But the people who are receiving these reports, to what basis or to what extent do they even give credence to the United States trying to come out and preach about human rights and preach about the standards of conduct that one country should have to another, or the idea that you countries shouldn't have nuclear weapons while the United States possess more nuclear weapons than any of these other countries, and themselves is a supplier of nuclear weapons, and very fact that the United States, as Michael pointed out, provides or has about 43% of total worldwide expenditures of for military purposes. The United States spends 43% of that total expenditure. And so the armaments that is in these different countries that are used to fight against the Americans at the present time, much of that armament can be directly traceable to American proliferation of arms throughout the world. And even if the arms may not have been American arms, it is a result of American arms, because when the Americans push out arms in one place, others recognize, well, we need arms also, so they may get it from China, they may get it from the Soviet Union or the former Soviet Union, or they may get it from especially the Nordic countries that are producing so much of these arms, and it's a big business to trade in that kinds of stuff. The international community has declared that this cluster bombs should be outlawed. It should be declared an international crime to use cluster bombs or to spread it out into the world. It's the United States who continues to be the most expansive producers and distributors of cluster bombs. So the United States reputation has fallen, and Galtung predicts it will be the collapse of the American empire. Michael is saying, but let's take a look at that and see how we can prevent the explosiveness by or from affecting each one of us, and if we can sit together and start envisioning the future of Hawaii so that we don't have to resort to that kind of explosiveness, but still have that dynamic leadership that will move us into a more positive direction, so that we have good thinkers, good leadership, and not necessarily having to take to the streets just for the purposes of action, but action based on well thought out plans. And so, as he was saying, this paper that I had been invited to participate in drafting along with him and another friend of ours, and it's called Envisioning a Hawaii for the Future, and it's in draft form, and that paper we'll put up on the website, and the website is Hawaiian Perspectives, in one word, hawaiianperspectives.org. It's not up yet, but it will be up by this week. It's just in draft form, and what he is doing is calling for sitting down, getting together, so we can talk with one another. We can go through this draft and try to take a more methodical approach to considering these various issues. Now, with both of these calls, what I suggested was one of the fundamental things that we need to address is the deep culture that we, as we observe these different things that are occurring, with what deep culture do we sieve through, or do we pass through our observations? It can be in the same culture that we have been in, which is a domination, individualism, and exclusion culture, and find new ways of dominating against others, but we leave the domination mentality in place. We can find the softer culture of what we call olu olu, lokahi, aloha. It's the ola culture that comes from Hawaii, but it's commonly found in many other places and among many other people, the more loving, caring, sharing, and softer culture. But it is through this cultural lens that we should look at the whole issue of economic relations with regards to our environment, how we educate our people and one another, how we treat the health needs of our people, and all of those things. Let's resolve first what is a cultural approach and then move beyond that. I know we've had some telephone calls while I was speaking. If you would like to call, and I haven't answered the phone, you may have noticed a call's ringing. I haven't answered the phone. But if you would like to call now, my having taken as much time as I needed to explain or do a summary of my thoughts on this matter. If you would like to call, the telephone lines are open. Telephone number is 524-1080. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, regarding Mike, the previous caller, I think I'm going to give the country about 2 more years.
Are you going to give the American country about 2 more years?
Yeah.
Before it collapses?
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this question. What happens after the collapse? What do you see as occurring within the United States after its collapse?
Yeah, that's going to be like, the people going to do the same thing as September 11th. They'll get together and, try and find out, just try to get together.
And people will try to get together and talk these things out and try to analyze what had happened?
Yeah.
And why the collapse?
Yeah.
I see. And what do you think will come out as a result of that analysis?
They'll see behind who's, like what's behind everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like everybody's saying, it's this guy, then, after that couple of years, we'll find out.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Right.
Aloha. And if you would like to call and share your opinions, telephone number 524-1080. There's a book out on that very subject, and that was written by Johann Galtung. It's called, I believe it's called The Collapse of the U.S. Empire, and Then What? Which is essentially the question that I had asked the last caller, and then what? And at least through the eyes of Mr. Galtung, who is a very interesting person. He comes out of Norway. He's a Norwegian, but having had experience in the United States, in Japan, in Sri Lanka, in many, many different parts of the world. So he is really an internationalist, knowing the languages of different places that he's visited and becoming somewhat of an expert at many of the cultures of these different places as well as their history. So that with regards to the United States, I would suggest that he is far more familiar with the history of the United States than most Americans are. And it's an interesting phenomena. We know that, what was his name? The Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese head of state, who actually graduated from a university in the United States, and I believe he may have been a history major, and he knew the history of the United States far better than most of the Americans. And so he saw the character of the United States, and as he did battle with the United States, or defended his country against the United States, he had an inside look very similar to what Sun Tzu, who wrote this book, The Art of War, had preached. He said, you need to understand the enemy in order to defeat the enemy. And Ho Chi Minh had understood the enemy the United States of America quite well and was effective in defeating, although many Americans don't like to come face to face with that reality. But he knew the American nation quite well and was able to bring about its defeat. Okay, with regards to Michael's invitation, we need to, and I will be speaking with Michael, but we need to set a date and time and a place by which we can gather and we can open the discussion up to a larger audience for meeting face to face. I appreciate your calling, your listening on this radio program, which is probably the largest way we can reach such a broadcasting of these ideas. But the receiving one telephone call after another, and all you do is you get to speak with only me. Or other callers should they call in, but it's hard to really carry on a conversation, and for a lot of this, conversing with one another would be I think perhaps a better way. And finally, one more point, and that was by our woman caller who talked about being somewhat surprised at the fact that the interstate highways and freeways are built such that they can take tanks, and they were meant for the possibility of tanks driving on the roadways. It is called the National Defense Freeways, and the reason for that is that they do build it to meet specifications such that not only tanks can traverse the highways, but it can also take airplanes landing on the freeway. So in terms of national defense, and many of us never thought about it being defense of an internal insurrection, but it would serve that purpose as well. So the preparation for these freeways right within our own neighborhoods or within our own vicinities that we reside in, yes, they have a military purpose for it. And so yes, you may be surprised by it, but that's how it was built, and that was what the intentions were. Okay, so I want to thank the callers for educating us on these matters. Maybe it's a sort of a wake-up call. Caller also mentioned about the greatness of some of these societies. You know, in let's take Iraq. Iraq is what is that? What some people call the origins or the place that was a Garden of Eden in Babylon, now known as what was that city? Baghdad, that was carpet bombed by the Americans. Well, that was Babylonia. That was the central place of much of the old world history that we have been hearing about. And many of the achievements obtained in mathematics, in science, and in chemistry came out of these regions. And yet we forget about it, like algebra, very similar to Al-Qaeda. And all the mathematical formulas, what is that, Pythagorean theory, was that it? It's too deep and too far for me to reach back and remember all of these things. But they come from these areas, and yet we don't fully appreciate. So it was quite a disappointment as we saw the invading troops into Baghdad go into the libraries and the museums and not appropriately respect the wealth of culture that the humanity that was in those museums. And so you had the breakdown, the robbery, and the trashing of a lot of these things stolen by not only American troops, I'm sure others also participated in it, but a lot of it being brought back to the United States as war trophies. And it was a destruction of the great history of the world in these areas. And so you can see this kind of what is the word for it? Well, anyway, a very bad attitude of simply walking into someone else's home, invading, which is an international crime, and yet no action is being taken by the Obama administration. So while if I was to choose between an Obama presidency of the United States as opposed to Romney presidency of the United States, of course, the less less atrocious one would be Obama. But that doesn't mean that it is not an atrocious presidency, especially as it deals with international affairs, especially as it deals with human rights, with civil rights, even within the United States. The whole condition of the United States has fallen, and so we do see the collapse internally within the United States as well as externally with all of those things that the United States is doing. All right, that's my, what do you call it, soliloquy, my statement on what is happening in the world today.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'apu me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Po'ohui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sibila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e minami